So good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you who I have not met yet, my name is Dr. JP Sanchez. I serve as the Interim Executive Diversity Officer at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, as well as the Executive Associate Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Health Sciences Center under Dr. Bogged. I want to thank you for joining us today as we have one of our own distinguished faculty members and leaders in the state of New Mexico join us in honoring the work and the legacy of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Today, we have Dr. Karissa Culbreath. And let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Culbreath. And I want you to start writing down your questions that you're going to be posing to her, especially as you hear about all the ways she's impacting our lives. Dr. Culbreath received her PhD degree from Vanderbilt University in microbiology and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill in medical and public health microbiology. She is board certified in clinical microbiology by the American Board of Medical Microbiology and has a strong background in basic and clinical research along with specific training in clinical and public health microbiology with international experience. She has many, many notable achievements and current positions. Now, I'm going to start off with one I am truly excited by because on top of all of her accolades, right, in the academic level, she has written a children's book titled Daddy's Little Girl that was nominated in 2016 for an NAACP Image Award for the children's book category. Now, going back to the academic and scientific arena, she is medical director and chief of the infectious disease division at Tricor Laboratories in Albuquerque. She serves as our associate professor within the Department of Microbiology. She serves as our HSC associate vice chancellor for BOSS. On the community level, she is our councilwoman in the Rio Rancho district. She is a mother, a wife, a daughter, and I'm sure I've missed a couple of things. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Dr. Culbreath.
Hello to all of my HSC colleagues. It's just so wonderful to be able to share with you all today how I wish, as all of us, that we could be in person. But I'm really excited to be able to talk today, and I'm mostly excited, as we were mentioning before everyone was joining, as people were coming in, that I don't plan on mentioning anything about coronavirus unless somebody has a pressing question that just can't wait. But, you know, everything that has consumed our lives over these past several months, this past year, it's such a good time to be able to pause and reflect and to think about kind of where we are right now in life, and to be able to have these reflective moments and thinking about the life and legacy of Dr. King and how even that propels us forward. It was very, very powerful for me to be able to take the time. So I'm going to share slides. Trust me, this won't be a lecture. It's not going to be that, but there's some images that I want to share and some concepts that I think are best described in pictures. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've gotten good at this, I think. So let me do this, and then we do this, yes, and then one more click. And I think we should be good. All right. So, so today I want to talk to you about this thought, finding fire, and I'll bring us back to where that comes from at the end of the talk. But finding fire, identifying purpose through academic service and community, and this is what you're never supposed to do. Is you're never supposed to have a subtitle. But I have a subtitle, and that is Lessons from Dr. King and a Spider. It'll all make sense in a little bit. So Dr. Martin Luther King has this quote that says, "There's nothing more tragic than to find an individual bogged down in the length of life, devoid of breath." And I think that's the challenge that so many of us face, whether or not we're students or trainees or where we may be in life. But we can be on this hamster wheel of life, and we are just bogged down in the length of the semester, in the length of the day, in the length of your program, in the length of a career, and don't take the time and the opportunity to capture the breath of life. And some would say that's probably something that I do too much of and spread myself a little bit too thin. But I never have wanted to be the type of person who's just bogged down in the drudgery of the day-to-day, because there is so much in life and there's so many opportunities that have been afforded to me that it's difficult for me to sometimes say no, though it's something that I've worked on and I've gotten pretty good at it. It may not seem so from the bio, but actually I've learned to tap into the things that truly drive my passions and truly drive the things that bring me fire in my life. And so I've really, this quote, tapping into the things that give the breath and the passion and the fervor and the life to this life that we live, that we're not just on this hamster wheel of life. The reality is there was a time in my life several years ago where I was experiencing what is only known as burnout, and so many people have experienced that as well. And even earlier in my career, during my training in clinical microbiology when I was in North Carolina, I experienced burnout to the point that I almost became the statistic of the person who left their training program. I actually quit. The truth of the matter is I quit my training program. My program director called me into his office and he said, this doesn't seem like you've lost your fire. It's literally what he said. He said, you've lost your fire. And I'm not sure what's going on, but I want you to take this weekend and think about what you want to do. And so I did. I took the weekend. I thought about what I wanted to do. I came back Monday at strong. And I said, you know what? I'm going to quit. And he was like, that wasn't what you were supposed to come up with. That wasn't the point of you taking this weekend. And I remember everything from that point. Something was blocked out in my mind. I really don't remember the rest of the conversation, but by the end of the conversation, I was preparing. I didn't quit, one, because he wouldn't let me, for which I'm ever grateful. And then two, I was preparing to go to Malawi to spend 2 months working on capacity development in resource limited settings. And what I learned about myself and my burnout in that moment is that we look at all of these factors, right? There's the work factors, the personal factors, the organizational factors. But really for me, my burnout happened when I had neglected, lost, forgotten, and abandoned my purpose. I'd lost my fire, right? And the thing that drives me and the things that fuel me. And so I want to talk about, right? So there's these, this burnout inventory, and I think we've kind of all seen this where we have, the levels of engagement and exhaustion and all of these things. So there's these burnout inventory profiles. And, I took one of these, at another point in my career, and I was, on the burnout inventory, on the burnout scale. And it was another time in my career where I had lost my fire. And I think we go through these periods of time where we get into the length of life and we get into the cycle that Dr. King talked about of we are just managing the length of life. And now the goal for us has to be, how do we just get out of managing the length of life where all we can manage is our own exhaustion, and we have these feelings of depersonalization, and we're doing stuff but not feeling like we've accomplished anything, because none of us, I think, on this call would ever say that we end our day not having done anything. But the question is, do you feel like you've accomplished something at the end of your day? Do you feel like you've been fulfilled? And so I wanted for us to really think about I am a children's book author. And so it's funny the things that inspire me. And one day, my son, he was about 2, and I had things to do, right? Things to do. But babies don't care when they're crying and teething about the things that you have to do. And so he wanted me to read him a book, and it was late at night. He was supposed to be asleep, and I had things to do. I had things to do so I could feel accomplished, but my son required more. And so he went and he picked up this book off the shelf, The Very Busy Spider by Eric Carle. And I'm like, okay, come on. Let me read this book. Come on. Sit on my lap. All right, let me read it. And I get to the end and I say the end. And anybody who's ever been around kids knows that once you get to the end of the book, that is the code word for children to say again. And so I got to the end of the book and he was like, again, mommy. And I read the book again. And I got to the end. And once again, mommy. I said, you know what? Okay, son, let me really read this book and put my energy into it so you can feel it and maybe you'll go to sleep. And on the third time when I read the book, all of a sudden I slowed myself down. I put my energy into being present and there with my son. And the words on the page that I read many times to my son, times before to my daughter who's 2 years older than him, suddenly they started to mean something different. And I started to hear them a little bit differently. I said, wait a minute, maybe this little boy who needed me to read this book to him so he could go to sleep, maybe there's something in this moment for me to capture and something for me and not just something for him. And so I felt really good about myself and I was like, oh, I had my moment. This is wonderful. Now he's going to go to sleep. I still got to the end of the book and he was like, again, mommy. And I was like, okay, now you know what? We all got what we need and you need to go to sleep. But I want to share some lessons that I learned from this very busy spider. And so the book says, and some of you might be familiar with it, but maybe for some of you it's been a while since you've revisited The Very Busy Spider. So early one morning, the wind blew a spider across the field. A thin, silky thread trailed from her body. The spider landed on a fence post near a farmyard, and she began to spin a web with her silky thread. Martin Luther King has another quote that says, the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. So when we think about our education and kind of why we are here or why we teach, right, whether we're in graduate school or medical school, nursing school, pharmacy school, whether we're teaching in these environments or we're administrators in these spaces, the goal of education is not just the teaching of the material, but it's the thinking critically, and it's combining education and intelligence plus character as our true goal. You know, we think about character in ourselves, in our classmates, in our colleagues, in our learners. The work is often intense. And sometimes we get so focused on the intensity of the learning that's required of us in the medical education and the intensity of the implications of our education, that there's lives behind everything that we do, whether we're administrators, educators, learners, practitioners. We think about the intensity of what we do, but don't always think about the intensity of teaching those character pieces. That the goal for us to come out of this educational experience isn't just to have the knowledge, because anybody can learn, but the goal is to put the knowledge along with the character. And for me, that experience came to full bloom, particularly when I was at my undergraduate institution, Fisk University and HBCU, where I could have learned the book material anywhere, but attending a historically Black college, for me, put the intelligence with the character. It put the knowledge with the experience to get to the true goal of education. And so oftentimes in life, we can feel like we're on the spinning wheel, or we need to figure out, are we spinning a web, right? And so there's this Gibbs reflective cycle that can move us out of just spinning this hamster wheel and get into truly spinning a web, right? Where this cycle of reflection, where we constantly take these moments to figure out not just what happened with my day, right? Not just what happened in my experiences, but what are the feelings that are attached with them? How do I evaluate and put those feelings into context? What do I now understand about myself differently after this experience? And what can I do differently to move myself to another place? If all we sit in life is constantly in the description of the event and constantly in just the one foot in front of the other, and constantly putting our heads down and just getting the work done and not having these reflective moments, those are the times that we just end up spinning our wheel and we feel like we've got stuff done, but we never accomplished anything. For me, that's always the recipe for burnout. For me in my career and in my life, that's always been the recipe for my personal failures. And I can look back with reflection and say the times when I failed and the times when I felt burnt out, it's mostly been because I've just been putting my one foot in front of the other and not looking up. I've said and I've learned that the reward for hard work is just more hard work. So working hard is not just going to be what gets you from point A to point B, and it's not going to be what takes you to kind of that next space that you're looking for in life. We've got to have these reflective moments that we move out of just spinning the wheel and get into spinning a web. And what does spinning the web look like? When we look at a spider's web, there's kind of these 3 S's that I found related to the spider's web, and it's strength, stretch, and survival. So there's kind of a old wives' tale. It's not truly scientific fact, but that a spider's web is stronger than steel. It's close, but not quite as strong as steel. But a spider's web, a single strand of a spider's web is almost as strong as steel. The reason why it has that strength is because it's really not just one fiber that's in the web. It's fibers upon fibers that are woven together that gives that one strand its strength. For me in my life, I see that showing up with that quote that we stand on the shoulders of giants. I gather my own personal strength from those that have come before me, from my ancestors and my elders who strengthen me even when I'm weak. So it's not just about me and my own personal ability. It's about the strength that I garner from those that have come before me. The other thing about a spider's web is that there's stretch to it. And when a spider's web is stretched, it actually becomes stronger. And so when it's pushed past what it should be, its limits, and when it's pushed back what you think it should be able to do, as soon as the spider's web is stretched, it actually becomes stronger during the stretch. And I think that's the amazing thing about many of us, and that we have to figure out for our own lives, is that when I'm stretched past what I thought were my limits, that then I don't break in those moments. When I'm stretched past my limits, that's when I actually get stronger. And that's when I actually find ability that I didn't even know that I had. But had I not been stretched, I would never be able to find that ability. And the other thing about a spider's web is survival. So even in the moments where we're stretched and we break, the wonderful thing about a spider's web is that if you break it at one point, that's the only part of it that breaks. If you just snap one piece of a spider's web, and there was a study that was published in Nature, and I could send it to anybody who cares about spider's webs, but they went out and they actually went and clipped spider's webs in one spot and then tested the ability of the web to still survive. And what happened with all different types of spiders and all different types of webs is that you could break it in one spot, but that didn't break the whole web. And there's been times in my life that I have been broken, and I thought that the failure, the break, the times that I messed up, the times where things were too much and I broke down, I thought it was going to break me forever. But the reality was that I was still going to survive. And they were able to blow up to hurricane force winds on these spider webs, and they were still able to survive, even if one part of them had been broken. And so I want us to understand that even when we're broken in times in our lives and we have failures and we've made the biggest mistake that you don't think you can recover from, that there's still always a space for survival. So we talk about, building character and looking at this reflective practice because Dr. King said that building character is the goal. Intelligence plus character is the goal of education. And so I'm not going to go through all of this, and it's not really the goal of this, but thinking about, what are the things that build our character? Kind of who are we and how do we treat others? What are the benefits that we're looking for? Are we looking to build ourselves and build our egos? Or are we looking to get to a higher, more reflective place? What is the nature of our work? Is this just the job that I do, or do I see this as a vocation, something that's deeper than just my day-to-day job? When we start to line these things up to our character, then all of a sudden our work becomes different. And what we do, we're not just in this space to give education, right? As educators, we're not just imparting education, but we are demonstrating and modeling character. We're modeling levels of caring. We're modeling the times that we take a personal risk to do the right thing, right? Taking the personal risk to show up for our students and our trainees, taking the risk to show up for our classmates and our colleagues in a different type of way. That's how we build and we demonstrate character through these moments of reflexive practice. So we continue on with the story. So the spider is building its web, and along comes a horse, and the horse says, "Nay, nay, do you want to go for a ride?" The spider didn't answer. She was very busy spinning her web. And then along comes the cow, and the cow says, "Moo, do you want to eat some grass?" The spider didn't answer. She was very busy spinning her web. "Oink, oink," grunted the pig. "Do you want to roll in the mud?" You already know, and if we were all together, we would all say it together, so you could say it in your office or wherever you are. The spider didn't answer. She was very busy spinning her web. Dr. King says, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. So we have to realize that there are times where we are truly called to serve. And in academic medicine, there is just this natural calling and this natural drive to serve, whether it's to serve our patients, to serve our learners, to serve our communities. And we see that showing up, especially here at UNM, that we just have this innate support and call to serve. And so in our call to serve, whatever that looks like, I think there's three important things that we learn from this spider. One is you do what drives you. Two, you know what feeds you. And three, stay out of the mud. Do what drives you. When the horse came to the spider and said, "Do you want to go for a ride?" The spider didn't answer. She was very busy spinning her web. There are some times in life where things that don't drive me come. And they say, "Well, do you want to ride on this adventure? Do you want to ride on this job? Do you want to ride on this committee? Do you want to ride on this activity?" And we have to learn what drives us. Because for the spider, going on that horse was going to take her away from her purpose because she had landed on that post and that's where she was supposed to build her web. And so you have to know where you're supposed to be. You have to know where you're anchored. And then you have to know how to be connected to the things that will drive you and the things that will help to push you and propel you towards your purpose and not be distracted by the other things that are around you. You have to know what feeds you because when the cow came along, the cow said, "Do you want to eat some grass?" Last time I checked, spiders don't eat grass. And so even though grass was going to nourish the cow, it was never going to nourish the spider. And so you have to know what feeds your soul, what lifts you, what encourages you, what does it for you, because what does it for somebody else and what feeds them and makes them happy, right? Nothing is happier than a cow just chewing on grass, right? But that's that cow's life. And so that's what feeds and nourishes the cow. You have to know what feeds and nourishes your own soul, what feeds and nourishes your calling to serve. And then finally, the pig said, do you want to come and roll in the mud? Listen, the only thing happier than a cow eating grass is a pig rolling in the mud. And there's definitely plenty of mud out there. But if a spider gets in the mud, the spider is going to die. And there's some mud piles that we have to learn how to stay out of. Because while a pig can survive in the mud, and there's been people who they just stay in mud and they just stay rolling in the mud. And I'm like, how do they even survive? How do they keep getting promotions? How do they keep getting all of this? How do they keep moving up in the world? Some people are just made to survive in the mud. But when you're a spider, you can't get in the mud with everybody else. You got to stay to your own purpose. And so this idea of vitality, this state of being strong and active, this energy, this power-giving continuance of life that's present in all things. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, one of my most prominent moments that I remember in my career was when I tried to leave my fellowship because I had lost my vitality. I'd lost my fire. They said, your fire is gone. And I went to Malawi and I spent 2 months there working in capacity development, building HIV and tuberculosis testing activities, working and supporting the community. And there my vitality was restored, because then is when I realized that my calling to serve is truly the thing that is my power-giving continuance for life. My calling to serve my community and to serve the underserved population is what keeps my fire burning and what keeps me going. And so I don't know what everybody's personal power-giving force, like I don't know what brings you vitality. So it would be nice, right, if there was some kind of like equation or something that you could plug in and say, this is how I get vitality. Well, somebody came up with one. But trust me, it's not that easy, because they say that this is the vitality equation that and for academic medicine, at least, right? An administration that cares about faculty, that positively communicates that care and provides purpose and clear direction for the institution. Plus a faculty member who is recruited to be lively, to be intellectually acute, and to value colleagueship. Plus a student body comprising of challenging and highly motivated students, plus adequate resources that are available and accessible to provide a supportive environment. And that equals faculty vitality. Well, if it was that easy, like I don't see a reason why we shouldn't be able to have it all the time, right? The reality is that in every case and in every instance, some of this is going to be missing, and some of this is going to be less adequate than we want, right? There's going to be less support, and every now and then a faculty member will feel a little less lively, and the student body may not always be as excited and motivated because they've been impacted by administration, and then the resources, right? There's never enough resources. So I add on my own little spin to this, because I believe that there's this multiplying factor for vitality when some of those things are lacking, that we have this purpose and passion, right? So if I were to add my spin to this vitality equation, I give a P squared. So if we add purpose and passion, it becomes this multiplying factor that when any one of these resources are lacking and are not at their best, when we can tap into our own vitality and we can tap into our own purpose and passion, they become this multiplying factor that we can start to then experience not just faculty vitality, but student vitality and administration vitality and community vitality, where we're all better by our presence and our power together. And so at the end of the day, though, this purpose and this passion, right, it comes out of ourselves. And so, we have, I'm an 80s baby, right? So we have that song, check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? So check yourself. Sometimes there's a moment where we have to check ourselves and say, where are these spaces that I have to remind myself, how do I get back to my passions? And that's what I've had to do so many times in my career, where I say, am I doing what drives me? Am I riding somebody else's horse, and am I riding somebody else's mission, or am I doing what drives me and what gets me back to where I want to be? Am I staying anchored and being true to myself and anchored in the places where I need to be? Do I know and understand the things that feed me? And am I staying out of the mud? There's some fights that we have to get into, but there are some times that we have to get out of the mud and know which fights don't have anything to do with us. So we carry on, and the spider keeps spinning the web, and meow, meow comes a cat. The cat asks, do you want to take a nap? The spider didn't answer. She was very busy spinning her web. I have to tell you, I'm a much better animal sounder with the kids, but you just get the red version. Maybe, it might be a little different, but you can be more soundy if you want to. Cock-a-doodle-doo, cried the rooster. Do you want to catch a pesky fly? And the spider caught the fly in her web, just like that. Martin Luther King has a quote that says, I came to the conclusion that there is an existential moment in your life when you must decide to speak for yourself. Nobody else can speak for you. I want to just take a moment and let us just sit with that for a minute. That there is an existential moment in your life that you must decide to speak for yourself, because nobody else can speak for you. We have to get into this point where we can walk in both these spaces of self-efficacy and self-agency, where self-efficacy means I have the knowledge, the skill, and the capacity for more. I know I can. I know I can do some things. And what I can't do, I know I can learn. But agency is this another level where it says I have the power to demand the tools and the resources that I need to be successful. And that's that point where we have to get to in that existential moment that says, I know I can, but I also have the power to demand and to require what I need to be successful. Because if I've not been given the tools and the resources that I need, I know that now I have the agency to manipulate the pieces and to move the things around, to demand and require the tools and the resources that I need, whether here or elsewhere. And that's where I see this movement of this spider building her web. One was that sometimes in life you can't sleep, right? The cat wanted to take a nap, and there's times in life where you can't sleep. There's times in life that you have to put in the work, that when other people are resting and other people are stopping, you can't, you have to keep going. Right? That's how you continue to gain the knowledge, the skill, and the ability and the capacity for more. Because when others are sleeping, you're not, you're working. But the other thing is that the rooster comes into this spider's environment. And this is a little bit different because while all of the other examples, these animals were bringing in stuff that the spider didn't need, the reality is that the rooster also eats a fly. The rooster said, do you want to catch a fly? Do you want to come chasing flies with me? And still, even though a fly is what the spider was looking for, what the spider understood was that spiders don't chase flies. Because if a spider tried to chase a fly, it would never catch it. What some people have to chase, when we set ourselves up and spend the time and do the work, there's times that other people are chasing and you see them chasing position and you see them chasing power. You see them chasing all of these things. I do believe that we can position ourselves in such a way that we can be successful, that there's some things we won't have to chase. And there's some opportunities that you won't have to chase to get, that all you have to do is keep putting in the work and keep building the web. And just like that, boom, the spider flew into the net. We have to learn through our ability of efficacy to say, I'm putting in the work, and then agency, that I have the power to create a net of influence, a net of mentors, a net of role models, that opportunities that other people have to chase, I don't have to chase them. And we look at this theory, right? This agentic theory of self that says, how do you set up this space of agency? And it happens first through mastery experiences. These mastery experiences mean that you set up a big goal and then you push through to success and allow yourself to fail. So often we think too small of ourselves and we don't allow ourselves to stretch, like I said before, and stretch and realize you can stretch and won't break. So we have to set ourselves up these opportunities for mastery that push ourselves farther than we ever thought that we could. The second thing is through social modeling. Social modeling is basically you can't be what you can't see. So we have to find these role models who inspire us, whether we know them in person or not. I'm working on a project right now where I have just a whole world of role models has opened up to me. Where I said, wait a minute, there's more that I can do and there's more than I can be because I now have this new group of role models that I will never meet. But now through social modeling, I see a new way for myself to be able to be an experience. And then through social persuasion, we have to find mentors who will not only model, but sponsor us towards success. And I'm a huge advocate of finding sponsors because so often we have mentors and we have these assigned people who just kind of point us into the right direction. But I have been beneficial throughout my entire career to be able to find sponsors, and sponsors have found me who put me into spaces where social persuasion, you got to find somebody who believes more for you than yourself. Right. So social persuasion is kind of like positive peer pressure, where there's the person who will tell you you can be what you can't even imagine that you can be. Right. The people who will say that you can be beyond what you even think. The other part, though, of social persuasion, a personal story, is that I actually had somebody once tell me that they would never recommend me for anything, anytime, anywhere. That's a quote. They said, I will never recommend you for anything, anytime, anywhere. And I use that moment in my life as a reverse social persuasion. And in my mind, I turned around, I left out of that office. I cried a little bit. It's okay. Remember, you can break. It's all right. You can break in one spot. You're not going to be broken forever. And I cried a little bit, but I said, you know what? Watch me. And in my mind, I said, I bet you will. And just a few years down the line, I got an invitation from somebody for me to serve on a board. And they said, we want to let you know who recommended you. And it was that person who said, I would never recommend you for anything, anytime, anywhere. So this wasn't a sponsor in the way that you would imagine. It was somebody who became a sponsor because I didn't break. And what they tried to use to break me, they actually had to turn around and eat their own words because I didn't break. And I used the power that I had to say, you know what, I'm going to make sure I have the knowledge, the skill, and ability, and I have the capacity for more. So maybe I'm not good enough for you to recommend me today, but trust me, I have the capacity for more. And eventually you will see who I am and who I can become. And then the last thing around this agency, right, is emotional awareness. Checking in with our emotions and allowing us to feel all of our emotions, looking at our mood and our physical well-being. That as we walk in these spaces of efficacy and agency, we begin to find our strength and our power to catch the things that we need to catch, right? We can build a web of efficacy and a web of agency that says that with the knowledge and the skill and the ability, with the training, with my education, with my background, with the tools that I've gained throughout all of my experiences, and then the power to demand the resources that I need to be successful, I will be able to create this web that allows the right things to come to me. And there, I'm not saying don't hustle and I'm not saying don't work, but sometimes we have to realize that we just have to create the web of networks and models and resources and mentors and community that all of a sudden opportunities and challenges, a positive challenge can begin to come our way. And so finally, the spider has caught her fly, and then along comes the owl, says, who built this beautiful web? The spider didn't answer. She had fallen asleep. It had been a very busy day. And while there's a time not to rest, and there's a time to work, when the cat wants to rest, the spider had to work. But at the end of the day, rest is still resistance. rest is resilience, and rest is reform. And so we have to realize that there is a time to work, but there is also a time to rest. And so this scholar, Tricia Hershey, she has this saying of rest as resistance. And we have to realize that the constant mindset of work is never meant for anybody. And so often in communities, specifically communities of color and historically marginalized communities, we feel that we must work all the time. And if we're not working, somebody else is outworking us and somebody else is outpacing us. And we have to work twice as hard to get half as much. And while all of that is certainly true, we also have to realize that rest is resistance. That rest is power, rest is resilience, and rest is reform. And so an internal medicine physician, Sandra Dalton Smith, has a book that's called Sacred Rest. And in Sacred Rest, she describes the 7 types of rest: physical rest, spiritual rest, emotional rest, mental, social, sensory, and creative rest. That many of us, if we think about it, we're not always getting all of these forms of rest. That physical rest, yes, that's the sleep. But have you ever slept all weekend and then you still wake up Monday morning tired? That you get all the sleep that you think you need. You just got 12 hours of sleep and you wake up tired. How is that even possible? Well, maybe it wasn't physical rest that we really needed. Maybe it was that spiritual rest, the rest that comes from prayer and meditation and connecting with community and getting into spaces on a deeper level, that we're coming out of ourselves and going into a different plane where we're just doing something different about our own spiritual connection with the world and the people around us. Or emotional rest, right? Tapping into those emotional spaces, getting ourselves a therapist, connecting with all of the resources that are available, that we can deal with the emotions that can be in turmoil in our life. Because if you're sleeping but your emotions are in turmoil, you are going to wake up as emotionally imbalanced as you were when you went to sleep. And so sleep can't fix all of this. Mental rest, right? Taking a break from the thoughts and the constant just drudge of information. That certainly was the space that I was in during the majority of the pandemic. When I would go to sleep thinking about coronavirus, I would dream about coronavirus. I would wake up still dealing with coronavirus, and I never gave myself this mental break. Social rest. And while we've had a lot of social distancing, that doesn't mean that we've had social rest. Because there are people in our lives that still will pull on us, people in our lives that will kind of pull on our time and on our energy, and it's not giving us that social rest that we need. Sensory rest, right? Turning off the devices, turning off the social media, right? So we're not getting constantly barraged with information. And then creative rest, which I think is really interesting, because if you're like me, you say, well, I'm not a creative person, so I don't need creative rest. But the reality is that academic medicine and medicine in general is creative, right? Coming up with a differential diagnosis, thinking through a diagnostic dilemma or a challenge, it is creativity where we're pulling together these different pieces and interweaving our knowledge with our understanding and coming up with solutions. And so sometimes we need to take a rest from even that and get out and get into some other type of creative activity and creative things in our lives, and redirect our creative energy towards other things. And so I want to give us time for conversation, and I want to give time for discussion. And so, I said that I would come back to this opening theme and this opening thought of finding fire. So in life, we started with thinking about us being on this wheel, and whether or not we were on a wheel, spinning a wheel, or spinning a web, whether or not we were just spending our life in the length of life and not truly tapping into the breadth of life and all of the opportunities that are aware and around for us. And so this idea of finding fire, it comes from St. Catherine of Siena, who says, be who God intended to be, and you will set the world on fire. And I think that's what's needed from all of us. If we can find our passion, we can find our purpose, we can find that P squared, that's that amplifier for vitality and for energy, that if we can tap into that for each of us, then we truly can find our fire, and we would have the ability to set the world on fire. And once you have one person who's found their passion and one person who knows how to tap into and find their vitality, the wonderful thing about fire is that fire spreads. And I believe if just a couple of you decide that you're really going to start to think about what's the thing that drives you, what's the thing that feeds you, what's the things that serve you, how do you build your web of network and influence, how do you build your mentors and your role model, how do you find the things that you need to be anchored to so that you can find your strength, how can you stretch and not break? If just a couple of you can tap into that, then I believe that you'll be able to spread that same energy, that same fire, that same passion to your colleagues, to your classmates, to your co-faculty, to the administrators around you, and we can all be able to set the world on fire. Thank you so much for your time, and I would love to take any questions today.
Well, truly inspirational, and thank you for taking me back to the 80s. Try to check yourself before you wreck yourself. It made me feel like you were dropping some knowledge, right? Some real knowledge beyond the mic. So I know there's a number of comments recognizing your inspirational words. I'm going to ask for Interim Dean McGrew to share her thoughts and reflections. Dean McGrew. Dean McGrew, if you are not unmuted, you may have to unmute. Oh, let me switch. Okay, let me work on that and try and just unmute anyone. But let's see if you can please use the chat box to pose questions to Dr. Culbreath. I will work on arranging for everyone to be able to unmute themselves, and my apologies for that. I'll pose the first question while I'm trying to deal with this situation. So I think one of the things that we often hear about is minority taxation. And it's heavily tied to our academic service work. How do you rectify the two? How do you address that question of, contributing to service, that being a fire in the belly, but also battling with the issue of minority taxation in academia? Right. So if you can share your reflections on that.
No, absolutely. So I think, the big thing, again, right, it's being able to tap into the things that drive you. And there's a time in career, certainly, where the right thing to do is to probably be on most committees, right? And to be able to get yourself out there and to give yourself the opportunities. But I think even still through service, and it's only a tax when it's a burden. It's funny, I was just talking to my daughter, my soon-to-be 9-year-old, about taxes last night. And we talked about how when we just pay tax, right, in our community, that it's the tax that pays for the roads, it pays for the lights, it pays for the firemen that come. And we only think about the tax when we think about the burden associated to it. But if we see the benefit of the tax, all of a sudden it becomes a little bit different conversation. And so that's where the taxation, right? Certainly there's the reality of the minority tax, right? That through service, you get asked to be on a lot of committees. You feel like you have to do a lot, but there has to be a space where it begins to benefit. And when I can see my tax serve me, then all of a sudden I'm willing to pay my tax. And when I see my tax benefit me, more often than it benefits not me and somebody else, then I don't mind paying it. And so that's what I literally talked to my daughter about last night, that it's not so bad to pay 7 cents for $1 when the fireman comes when your house is on fire. And so I think what we have to do in academic medicine and in academia in general is make sure that the tax that we require of our minority students and faculty is actually benefiting them. And as minority students and faculty, we have to then, right? I mean, you may have to have your own personal Boston Tea Party moment where you say, until this tax benefits me, I got to throw all of this into the harbor and start over because this has not served me. And so for my career and kind of where I am right now, I will pay a tax when it comes back and benefits me and when it serves me. And I kind of had to have my own Boston Tea Party moment where I said, no, until this works for me, no taxation without representation. So if you won't hear me, if I don't have a voice at the table, you just brought me here and I have to be here so that you fit your diversity requirement, that's not going to work. No taxation without representation, right? We've all gone back to our civics lessons in 2020. And so I think that for me is how I start to reconcile how we deal with those spaces.
Thank you so much. And my apologies again, Dean McGrew. Are you able to share?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yay. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to Dr. Culbreath. A few years ago, Dr. Romero and the Office of Diversity did a program called the AIM Mentoring Project. And Dr. Culbreath and I got matched up. And to this day, I ask myself, who's the mentor, me or her? And I would challenge to say that we probably both do it for each other at various times in our careers. And I'm just so honored to be part of her career. But I've been thinking a lot about what you said about this culture, and we sort of get into this bragging thing or this sort of poor me thing. I'm working all the time, and we use it as a measure. And I think we do it more when we're burned out, and we say to people, and I caught myself today saying to a couple of people, well, I'm booked 7 to 8, so maybe it'll be, 5 a.m. tomorrow when we can talk. And I thought, whose fault is that really? Whose fault is that? And so I think we have to ask ourselves, whose fault is that anyway? And part of it is stepping back, saying, really, what is my return and investment for this meeting? Of course, there are some things we all have to do, right? Because we all need to take our turns. There's occasionally things, but for the most part, there's so many things out there that we can choose amongst that really we get the return on investment for our time, for our energy. Some things I'll do without pay because I just believe so strongly in them. Some things I'm certain I want to do for pay because it's not necessarily what I want to do. So just thank you for everything that you do. And I'm just so delighted that you are the presenter this week.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I think the little matching process, it was like Match.com. And so this was definitely like a match made in heaven, right? We could do a look Match commercial. But, Brene Brown, author that talks a lot about leadership and vulnerability, she has a quote that I don't have exactly, but it talks about us using exhaustion as a badge of honor. Mm-hmm. I think so often we brag on our exhaustion and use that exhaustion as a badge of honor. And I wonder how much we could flip it, right? If we were able to say how rested we were as a badge of honor, how much time we took for ourselves. And some of that just comes from culture, that we have to learn to celebrate each other's rest and the time and the boundaries and the margins that we give ourselves. Because I certainly come from a long line of people that use exhaustion as a badge of honor. And so it's so natural that I have to truly counter that. But then it's built into academic medicine, right? And very few other careers is there guilt for taking time, right? In very few other careers is there the feeling that your entire life is owned by the academy, that your entire 24 hours of your day is due the academy, and the time that you take is yours, instead of offering our time to the academy that belongs to the academy, and then keeping that time for ourselves that belongs to us. And so, I mean, it's a whole culture switch that has to happen.
There's a great, I don't know if you know it, and then I'll be quiet, but there's a great social media strand called the Nat Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's,
Yep.
you know, the Nat Ministry?
Yeah,
It's
that was what I was referencing. Yeah.
Yeah, the women of color, and really to do this work, and people are called on women of color, others, but it's the images are of the rest are so beautiful. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dean McGrew. And we also have our Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion of the Health Sciences Center, Dr. Romero Leggett. If you could also share some questions and comments.
Well, hello, Dr. Culbreath and Karissa, thank you so much. I was coming from clinic and came on at the time of the story, which I loved, and just I just love the way you talk and you're telling us what's the code word for a kid when you get to the end of the story, and it's like again, and it was wonderful. But I love the analogies. I love what you had to say, the parts about, the passion and purpose, and you just had so many messages for so many people, all of us on this call, and there were just so many things in there that I know resonated. But I really appreciate, again, and when you're talking about Brene Brown, I actually got her book for Christmas and started reading that, and about being vulnerable and all those things. But I just have to say thank you so much. And until we start talking about it, and we start role modeling it and doing it in this way too, it does remain silent, right? Like these things about we work like, crazy, and you use it as a badge of honor, and nobody wants to say anything. And I mean, just if we think about it a minute, what is that saying, like, as we're role modeling, and we're role modeling to these, our children, our families, our learners, our colleagues. So I'll just thank you for the strong messages, and all really, what a better way to honor Dr. Martin Luther King than the way that you just inspired us today and really gave us some meaningful things to really reflect about, and then to start doing it, and being strong and doing some of this. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you.
Really,
thank you. And, I wrestled with, let me get data and references, and let me make a presentation, and then I think, again, right, that idea of role modeling and vulnerability and transparency and being authentic, right? Yes, I'm 100% scientist. It's not for decoration. This is real, but this is also who I am as well. And I think being able to have depth to our life and depth to who we are, and being able to model that depth to students who are coming knowing that there's depth to them. And in the academy, our goal can't be to shallow people, right? And so often in the academies, we squeeze all the goodness out of people and leave just these frames and these shells of individuals. And I hope that we here can continue to model spaces where we can all be whole and complete and honest and authentic with who we are in both the academic excellence, but also the depth of who we are.
Well, you better be ready to be going on the circuit here, because you're coming. I want that talk for many places already. I'm already thinking, but you better be ready. I was like, okay, we know you're doing the COVID thing too. Okay, I'm gonna give you that. But this is so important, your messages. So get ready here. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank all, first of all, and most importantly, thank you, Dr. Culbreath. You're doing so many important things, not only at our institution, but across the state and across the country. So thank you for allowing this time for us to spend with you. And you did what we're called to do in academia, which is to reflect, be introspective, and give critical thought to our journey to serve as a role model and mentor to others. So, phenomenal, inspirational talk as listed by many people on the panel. This will be shared broadly to an entire campus. And like Dr. Romero Leggett said, BINGAP will always also be reaching out to you, as well as a number of other organizations. Remember, all panelists that this event, as well as the talk by Dr. Lipson, was sponsored by the Office of the Dean, Dean McGrew, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Medical School, and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at HSC. I want to thank everyone again for joining us, and have a great day. Thank you, Dr. Culbreath.
Thank you.